So as a small YouTuber, it's no surprise that I have a 9 to 5 as a desk jockey. What may come as a surprise is that my commute is 40 minutes one way. This leaves me a lot of time to myself in the car. Some may choose to reflect on the day, some may listen to music, but I watch YouTube videos. That's right, I watch YouTube videos while I drive. Video over, this was all an elaborate ruse to come out as a blatant criminal. FBI, open up! Obviously I'm joking. Though I do have YouTube videos playing, I keep the phone out of sight so I can keep myself and those around me safe. On top of that, it's usually video essays. Mainly, this past week I've been exploring the dense catalog that Game Maker's TOOLKIT has to offer. Because let's be honest, as a C# coder, game development has never been out of my range of exploration. But all this GMTK has brought about the self-reflection that I've been avoiding all along. So what's the point? Why the long introduction? All of my previous videos have been an experiment to catalog what I can come up with in a week. But I want to try something different. I came to the realization that I've played with Unity in the past, but I've never completed and shipped a game. And I feel like that's an experience that I need to get under my belt. So in the spirit of GMTK and his record-breaking jams, I'm going to host my own. So what would happen if a person with very little experience tried to complete a game in a month? Let's find out. When I first thought of this idea, I figured I was going to make a fighting game, but that was stupid and dumb, and I have a very smooth brain. Fighting games bad because I'm bad at fighting games and I never play them, so I had absolutely no clue where to get started. Instead, after 30 minutes into the project, I decided Dungeon Crawler would be way easier. Something like Moonlighter came to mind, so that's what I made. But why make it easy? Might as well give it an algorithm to randomly spawn levels. I made a bunch of different rooms and spent 2 whole days on the code, and after a while I had the dungeon generator somewhat working with some janky art. All I needed now was a character to walk around the world with, and then I got started with the gameplay. I figured a month wasn't awfully long and I had to create every aspect of the game, so I went with a single game loop. Explore the dungeon, fight enemies, find the chests, kill the boss, and then you get a score based on a certain number of factors. So I put some placeholders for what would eventually be the chest and the boss, then went on to waste 3 days on a piece of complicated code that I eventually wouldn't even use. After about a week, both productive and not, I had a random map generator, an animated main character, and placeholders for everything else. And I kinda needed to add more to the world. The second week was far more productive than the last. With a large portion of the game already laid, I knew assets were going to be my biggest undertaking. So within this week, I added trees, hated the way they worked, and drew different ones, 2 enemy types, different ground variations, a house with a monk character that would heal you if you could find them, and I drew the chests. And I made an annoying mistake of creating a loading screen early in the week, so now I had a big hindrance in my way whenever I wanted to test a new asset. The third week was more of the same in different aspects. I created UI, 3 hearts for health, and a somewhat useless mana bar. I animated the chest and gave the chest items that either affected your health or mana if you could find them, created a game over screen, started the end boss design, created a 3rd enemy type, worked on the math for the scoring system, and started the end scene. I wanted to dip my toes in the world of cutscenes, so I took a day out to create a cutscene for the monk when he heals you. At the end of the 3rd week, I still had to finish the boss battle and put some polish on everything, and I was fighting some huge motivation issues. I had been working non-stop on the game for the past 3 weeks, and the last and most important week I spent the least amount of time on the game. I finished and animated the boss battle and gave him 2 different attacks he could choose from, and a final phase. I created some music for the main menu, and the theme that plays while you are in the maze. I added the sounds for the footsteps, menu UI sounds, game over music, and added white noise to represent trees blowing in the wind. I also created a menu, and finalized a score screen at the end, and I was done. Now I had to build the project, and I have never done this before, and surprisingly, there was only one error that prevented it from building. It was a piece of code I used for testing, and it could be commented out, and the build was successful. I spent some time of the last 2 days figuring out itch.io because I've never been on the site before, and I had to make some art and all that for the homepage. There were some things that didn't translate into the build, so I spent some time on fixing those as well, and the page was live. Before I go into detail over certain things, link is in the description if you want to play. So even though I wrote a journal entry every single day totaling 20,000 words, and took about 120 hours of footage, I'm not going through my day-to-day with you because let's be honest, I've never done this before and a lot of my notes were, this took way too long to figure out, and I spent most of my day debugging. Instead, let me offer some reflection. If there was any aspect of game development that I was comfortable with, it was coding. So ultimately, making a piece of somewhat complex code to control the level generating was the main goal. The idea was simple, all I had to do was make prefabs of rooms, add them to a list, and write a piece of code to randomly spawn the rooms in. I drew up some basic art, put the pieces together in Unity, and added some colliders to determine whether an area was empty or if the room was going to overlap with another, and press play. My project immediately froze. This kind of thing happens when you let a recursive script go unchecked. But why? The colliders were not set to spawn if it overlapped with another. Turns out, colliders need rigid bodies to work. I had completely forgotten about this and I had to restart my project damn near 10 times before I googled, why triggers no work Unity? And the first sentence said rigid body and my brain had never felt smoother. Afterwards, the code worked. It was lovely, things were spawning but the range was just off. Sometimes I would get levels with 300 plus rooms, other times it would spawn 2. In order to fix this, I figured it would be best to create a difficulty setting that the user could choose from. Easy would spawn 25 to 50 rooms, and the hardest difficulty could spawn 180 to 350 rooms. I wrote a new script to implement this and the levels now had consistency. But this brought about a whole new problem: loading times. The problem wasn't how fast each room spawned. The real problem is that by restricting each difficulty to a certain amount of rooms, the level had to restart repeatedly until it was within the parameters laid out. So even though I programmatically trimmed the list at runtime to make it easier to maintain consistency, the level spawner still took 5 minutes to load successfully. The only method I could think of to solve this, while maintaining the random nature of the levels, was by running the script throughout development and saving the successful levels. I rewrote my script to spawn complete levels at runtime instead of room by room, and it worked. Now I needed to automate the process to make my life easier. A few Google searches later and I could let the level builder run for a couple hours, and I would have a few hundred levels that I could pick through. This drastically decreased loading times, from 5 minutes to 2 seconds. The only drawback was that it decreased the amount of possible levels from 48 million down to whatever I could store on the hard drive. But I figured for a game that I made in a month, it would be fine. I chose to use pixel art for the game for several reasons. Firstly, because pixel art is easy. Whoa. Don't write that comment just yet. Pixel art is easy if you need something passable. Making good pixel art is hard. I wasn't making good pixel art. I just needed something that didn't look like a 4-year-old scribbled on the wall. Which, most of my original art looks like that. Also, I really like pixel art. The main character in Monk's proportions were ripped directly from the main character of Moonlighter. The assets for the ground, grass, and the monk's house were direct rip-offs as well. The trees were originally going to be rip-offs, but halfway through the project, I didn't feel like the trees were interacting with each other the way I wanted them to, and I didn't really have the patience to fix it. With the game being top-down, I figured I could just draw the tops of the trees and have them layered on top of the main character and objects within the game to simulate depth. And I kinda have to be honest, I liked it a lot better this way. The only caveat is that in order to create multiple trees and keep the rooms looking somewhat different from room to room, the Photoshop brush tool was used, which any die-hard pixel fan will tell you is straight up cheating. The intention behind pixel art is having control over each pixel, and I threw that out the window. I hope you can forgive me. The animations in the game were something I had to think about early on. We're talking third day at least. Mainly there was a hard choice between using bone animations with Spine 2D, or just popping open Aseprite and drawing frame by frame. Both have their problems, admittedly. I have absolutely no experience with Spine 2D, and little experience with bone animations. And while I have a lot of experience with frame-to-frame animations, I'm not good at it. And it's tedious. When push came to shove, I decided to stick with what I knew, because a game that was made in a month is expected to look bad. So I just kept telling myself that and got to work. The main character was animated in each direction he could run, as well as an idle animation. The mage and Boulder Baby only had one animation, and the druid had 4 for some reason. On top of this, I also created death animations for the main character and all the enemies. The boulder boss was by far the hardest thing I animated. This might be because I decided to draw him about 200 pixels tall, so I ended up finding a way to cheat his animation process by chopping his body parts into pieces and putting them on different layers. Then I could just rotate and move each body part and fill in the gaps. This worked out great, because animating a 200 pixel tall character and having to draw him for 12 frames would have taken me a week. Next time when I do a project, I think I'm going to do a few things different. But the main thing would be to work on context more. The world and environment assets are roughly scaled 5.5 times, while the characters and enemies were scaled 4 times. While not vastly different, it does make a difference, and the eagle-eyed players can spot the difference in scale. Not much thought went into the AI or main character, because I wasn't concerned that the game was fun. This may trigger some game developers, but I have my reasoning, and I've said this before. I've never made a complete game in my life, ever. How can I ensure that a game is fun if I have no clue what goes into making a game in the first place? Yeah, I could easily think of some interesting 10-phase boss battle with mini cutscenes in between with a heart-thumping soundtrack, with a touching climax that brings the main character to tears. But knowing what I know now, I know something like that takes months, even for experienced developers. So I just wanted to get my feet wet before jumping in. The boulder babies just chase you and hurt you when they touch you. The mage can either move towards you quickly or shoot an energy blast. The druid can either spawn tree spikes from the ground, throw an earth orb at you, or move towards you. And finally, the boss can either spawn boulder babies or chase you, and when his health drops low enough, he goes into his final phase where he rolls around the room randomly. The main character can run around and shoot fireballs. That's it. During development, stories were thought up for the main character, boulder boss, the boulder babies, and mage, along with another boss that was thought up, but never made. None of this made a difference, because with no context of how long these things take, I had no opportunity to get this into the game because a month is short. At the very least, I learned a lot, and I hope to use this newfound knowledge in future projects. The music and sounds were surprisingly one of the most fun and difficult parts of the process. I knew I wanted a somber feel to the game, so the sound of trees and soft piano music was a must for the menu screen. Also, the somber sounds played into the story I had crafted throughout development. Though the story was never implemented, the music carried the feel I was going for. The menu theme was made over an afternoon, and I knew I had the right theme when I spent almost 30 minutes listening to it on a loop. The maze theme took more time than usual because I didn't exactly know the feel I was going for. After a while, I took inspiration from the Lost Woods and Breath of the Wild and made a theme to kind of extract the mystical nature from that. The Game Over theme was meant to feel like the end of a journey, but not the end of a life. And constantly throughout the entire game there was this low white noise to represent the sound of trees swaying in the wind. I was able to make the sound of footsteps using the shoe against a piece of rough clothing method, but every other sound in the game I had no clue how to make. This caused a lot of trial and error where I would make a sound, put it in the game, only to find out that I hated the sound. But by the time I was working on sound, it was the last week of development, and I had to either choose to use them or not. This left me with fewer sound effects than I wanted, and left me with no time for juice at all. It was enlightening and something I had never done in all my tinkering with Unity. So it felt like I had to use a part of my brain that I've never used before. The game is live on itch for free if you want to check it out. This month was incredible, and I would absolutely love to do it again just because of what I've learned. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you feel like helping a brother out. Yell at me at the comments below, and drop a like if you, liked it. I plan on creating a video on how I created the random dungeon generator soon, so stay tuned for that. Okay, bye.